Well, hello there again, friends. Today is 10/6/2022, and today is the Odin Project blog day 154. And I have arrived! Woohoo! React Introduction module of the JavaScript course, so entering the React section. I am 70% complete with the JavaScript section section course, if you will. Yes, highly anticipated, and they get you right into it. This is a meaty intro, more so than I thought. But the good part is they do repeat a lot of concepts, and they have you doing some hands-on stuff. So the point of today's video is basically just to do a cursory review and do the knowledge check, and then let you guys do the heavy lifting on your own. I'm not going to make this a long video because there is a lot of material. It does tend to repeat itself, but take that as a good thing because repetition will help cement the concepts in more. So that's kind of the gist of it. So through here, they're telling you what React is, and I'll go over this here in a minute because this kind of answers one of the questions, I think, and it sums it up well. There's basically two types of components. You can have a functional component or a class component that looks like this, and has a render on it. That's a class component, and it extends from the component module of React, and then you can have a showing examples of a good and a bad render, and here's an example of a functional component instead of a class component. This is what we're more familiar with as far as syntax wise. You're kind of using the JavaScript Jest functionality or syntax to create, but it's still but in the sense that since we're importing React from React, it's still React's going to see this as a component, and that's why when you return div, this is not HTML, it's JSX, which is JavaScript XML essentially. And so that's why, and the article or the whole material goes through how you create this, why this is called class name and not class, and how you're using the class name attribute instead of class like you would in JavaScript or CSS. So there's that. Again, I'm skipping over a lot of this. They do have you create your first React app by using this create React app at the command line, and so when you run npx create React app, call it my first React app, essentially it builds it out, and you get this right here. Blow it up a little bit. And so they teach you through the module of how to interpret all this, what all this means. Your entry point is basically your index.js it uses Webpack. So this is kind of this would be like your entry point, along with this is importing app from app. So your true entry point and place where you put your code is right here inside of this app.js file. So this here is a functional component, and it's got a return in there that returns that JSX that I just spoke about in different variations of it. This is kind of like your boilerplate, if you will, that gets you started. And in the browser, so here's your app CSS anyway. I'll go to the browser in a second. Very similar to regular CSS. It basically is. We didn't go over that in the material though, but based on the hierarchy of the structure of how the files are laid out, app CSS is basically your CSS for your app. So this would be CSS that's applied to your React in particular, instead of just creating a regular CSS by style.css and putting it in at the root of your folder, it will look at this app CSS as part of the logic of the React. And then here's the public source. This is the index.html that's out there that's served to the web, to the browser. A lot of commented code here, or commented items to let you know what plugs in where. Yeah, and so if you take it out to the browser, when you run the React app, create React app, it does end up getting you here at the end. I won't go through that because it's pretty detailed. It's not detailed. It's easy to follow. The detailed instructions are out there on how to do it, and they walk you through it. It only takes literally like 3 minutes. And we'll go through the DOM here in a minute, but here's what you get. It's basically just a spinning React logo. That's a favicon icon with even tells you right here, edit your source app.js where we were just at, and save to reload. Since it is running Webpack, it is live, so as soon as you save your file, this will automatically refresh and reload. And then there's a hyperlink here to learn React. And yeah, here is and they give you a link in the text. I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but this is the Firefox add-on that you would hit. I won't link it in the description because it's actually in the Odin link files. But you can see there's a ton of people using it. 4.7 stars, but there's different React ones, so this is the one I chose. I actually looked through them all to make sure that they're right. The other ones you'll see if you just type in React are made by individual people, not React the company, not Facebook. So make sure that you're choosing or searching for the React developer tools. And that link is right here. So that one right there. And then the assignment, they have you read a bunch of articles, watch some videos going over the concepts of React and the different structures of it. Because of information overload, I will say I didn't read the additional resources. I started to and I stopped because I didn't want to have information overload, like I just said, and give myself too much, because there is plenty in here to chew on. So it's not hard. Since we've been working with JavaScript for so long, it's just different. The way you approach things is different in an easier way, different in a good way. Things are packaged together. Everything's compartmentalized and packaged nicely, and so that's the beautiful part. So without further ado, let's get in the knowledge check. So why should you learn React? So React is one of the most powerful, widely used front-end frameworks. The landscape for front-end frameworks has changed a lot. So basically, they're saying React's one of the more popular ones. And some of the reasons why is to use is reusability of components, well supported due to popularity. React is not opinionated, which means it won't force you to follow any specific patterns. It's all up to you. There's a small learning curve, especially when you already have a good grasp of JavaScript. Just like I was mentioning a moment ago, there's not a huge learning curve. It's just kind of the way you look at things. JSX is a it feels very much so far like a variant of JavaScript, because it looks like it, but it doesn't necessarily behave. It does behave like JavaScript under the hood. That's what React does. But the way you syntactically type it out, it looks more like HTML. So it's kind of funky in that way. And and some of the YouTube videos go over that in more detail. Apparently, I haven't been through puberty yet. So what is JSX? So JSX takes you to the React documentation. So basically, I was just kind of mentioning it earlier. JSX is a syntax extension to JavaScript. We recommend using it with React to describe what the UI should look like. JSX may remind you of a template language, but it comes with the full power of JavaScript. That's kind of what I was saying in a nutshell, that JavaScript is running in the background and handled by React, and so you're just not really writing JavaScript, pure JavaScript like we've been doing. You're writing this JSX, which kind of looks more like HTML. It's kind of bizarre feeling putting HTML in a a JavaScript file, but that's what you do. So there's that, and that's just how React uses it. So that's how they've decided, how Facebook decided to do it. What is a React component? So I kind of already went over that earlier. So this is the structure of a component, and so the idea of building a website is the outside here, like your main page here, would be like your app.js that we just went over a little bit ago when we were in the code. So that would be like your app right here. That would be a component. Nav bar could be its own component. Main article, its own component, and newsletter sign up its own component, all child components within the app.js, which is the root, if you will, the root div tied to the root div of your page. And they just kind of go over that right here. Actually, I just simplified it, summed it up for you. But what is the difference between a functional and a class component? And it takes you out to this Medium article. It goes through the differences. I'm not gonna like bore you with all this. You definitely want to read through this on your own. But what's the difference? So the most obvious difference is syntax. A functional component is just a plain JavaScript function which accepts props as an argument and returns a React element. Kind of like I was saying earlier, it's basically a function. A class component requires you to extend from React.component and create a render function which returns a React element. This requires more code but also gives you some benefits which you'll see later on. And I don't remember exactly what those benefits are, and I don't remember if there's a question on that. Not really. But essentially the benefit... Okay, it's not in this particular article, but anyway, there are differences. There are benefits to cons to both, and I don't want to make this video overbearingly long, so we'll continue on. How should you structure application into components? So I'm going to skip that because it does go out to this dev2 article out here. It's not a bad article. It's just I feel like Odin does a more concise job of describing that up here with the idea of the app that we just went through, so that same concept applies. That's how you build out. This is the best practice for building out your components. So you have your main component app.js, you have a navbar app, component app, main article component app, newsletter component app, and these are child apps, child components, so to speak, of the main app component. And you can cross props down. You can pass props up. You pass props down and pass callbacks up when you build good apps. What does create React app do? I kind of went over that earlier. That creates the boilerplate, essentially the nuts and bolts of React and getting things set up, and getting the engine going, and getting everything working. Boilerplate, so to speak, for you to build your app based on that. So the official answer is developers at Facebook came up with a great tool called Create React App, which sets up a complete React application for you. By running one command, it does all the necessary setup and config for you immediately start working on your project. So it kind of just gets that boilerplate going. It gets you past the setup and the configuration, gets Webpack set up for you, so you don't have to. It's nice, guys. I'm super pumped. You don't have to screw with setting up. You might have to tweak your JSON packages later, but like it automatically sets up your Webpack. It sets up your JSON file. It sets up your Webpack file, and the dependencies are all set up. You don't have to screw around with, making sure that you put certain switches and parameters in there. It's all like set up. So I really, the little understanding I have right now, I'm super excited about it. It makes things so much easier. I feel like we just went from drinking milk to our first steak, and how good it tastes. And that's probably a terrible analogy, but it just seems so much easier. Like if you've read through the material and you're watching this now, and you went through this material already, I think you understand what I'm saying. Like you don't have to sit here and create DOM elements, and you basically have to create a root right here and get the create root to basically attach uh, React to the root element ID that you hard code into your index file, and then that's it. Everything else is handled by the by React, which handles the rest of the DOM. You don't have to uh, write code for querying elements or code for creating elements. So far, for what we learned so far, is it's all going to be handled for you by React, which is really freaking sweet. And the last thing is, instead of the DOM tree, what is displayed when you inspect an element using the Components tab provided by React Developer Tools? So it takes you up here, and this doesn't really answer the question, so I'm just going to briefly go through. I'm going to end the video by going through the dev tool with you. So they have you go out, and like I said earlier, I showed you this link, so you download the React Developer Tools, because if you're following along with me, you're using Firefox likely in your Ubuntu, so it'll install this React Dev Tools here, and then you end up getting two additional tabs here. You get a Components tab and a Profiler tab once you refresh the browser after you install it. So you can see it fired up and running right here because I have DevTools up. So what you do, I won't go over the profiler, but basically answers the question. Components, you click on it, and then you get a list of all your components. You click on app or whichever one. This one's just, it only has app because that's the only, as you've seen, that's the only component we have defined. And it shows over here what it's doing. So its props is empty. It's not entering or passing any props yet. It's rendered by create root, which uses the React DOM, and this must be the version number. We didn't really go through that in the material too much. And then source here is where it lives at. So the app create root is rendering, and source lives in the index.js line 10. So if we go to the index file, line 10, there's the app. So that's, again, this is JSX. So that looks like that's, HTML, but it's not. It's JSX calling the calling the app function to run. So we're going to root.render. We're going to run the app.js, which is called from the import here, which comes over and runs this app module. So line 10 here is where it's seeing that this app is sourced at, which is true, and it's used to create root. Which means that we're creating constant root here using React DOM to create the root, and we're attaching the render function to the root element that is hard-coded in, should be hard-coded in the HTML. Right here, yep, ID root, so it's attaching itself to this particular line right here, and that's how it's running it. And then it even says this is your HTML file template, and this is basically anything in here is where React's going to be running itself. So anything inside the body is where React's going to be running itself, and it's just saying that. You can read all that on your own after you run your React app, create it. So yeah, so that's the information there, and that's what we get from it. So that kind of answers the question of instead of the DOM tree, what is displayed. So that's just basically it. So there'd be more to it if we had built out our own apps. There would be all the functional or class components will be sitting here, and we click on them, and we'll get our props information, our rendering information, and our source information. Over here, you can view the source of the element. So instead of going back, bopping back like I just did to Vscode, you can do it right from the browser. So it targets line 4 here of app.js to show you that this is where your source starts for the app component. And if you go back to component, if you click inspect, you can inspect the DOM element, which takes you back here. Again, just answered the question of instead of going bopping back to VS Code, you can do it right from the browser, and it's targeting this div right here, which we just answered because it's inside of root. So it's targeting root ID, and it's creating the class app part of the functionality of that JSX is creating that div inside in the return statement. So that is how that works. And sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place here. And this one will suspend the select components. They talk about this in the text, but it won't work here. We'll get an error message because we don't have a suspension container set up, so it would cause an error. So basically, it's doing a fail-safe catch and not letting me enter into suspend mode. And that's it. So, thanks for coming along today, along the ride and the journey today. I hope you learned a little bit. I went through that really fast. There's a lot of material. Take your time with it. And thanks for coming along the journey today. Please like, share, and subscribe for more content. And let me know in the comments section what your guys' thoughts are on React introduction and what your takes are from it, and are you excited to move forward in it and get started in some projects. So let me know in the comments section. Would love to hear from you. So with all that said, until next time, see ya.